You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 4th of March 2026 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up, the US says it struck 2,000 targets in Iran as part of its joint bombing campaign with Israel. We'll get the latest as the US and Israel continue their bombardment. Also, we'll focus on Turkey as it becomes a destination for Iranians fleeing war. We'll examine the role Ankara wants to play as the whole region is drawn into the conflict. Plus, 6 months after young people's protests brought down the Nepali government, the country holds its first elections. We'll examine what's up for grabs and whether this is a real chance for democratic change. And China's double meetings of defence and economy are held this week. We'll look ahead to them and we'll hear the latest news from the world of TV and look at the world of luxury travel too. That's all coming up on The Globalist, live from London. First, a quick look at what else is happening in today's news. The international prices of oil and gas have risen again as concerns grow that supplies could be affected by the conflict in Iran. Myanmar's junta has said it's to ration the use of private cars as part of fears over the supply of fuel. And prosecutors in Cuba have charged 6 people with terrorism in connection with an incident last week. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, the United States says it struck 2,000 targets in Iran as part of its joint bombing campaign with Israel. Yesterday, for the first time since the US and Israel launched their strikes on Iran, the US president has taken questions from reporters, and Donald Trump claimed that just about everything in Iran has been knocked out. Well, I'm joined now by Renad Mansour, who's a senior research fellow of the Middle East and North Africa programme at Chatham House. Very good morning to you, Renad.
Good morning.
So the effect of 2,000 strikes, what would they be?
The intention is to completely decapitate and degrade most of Iran's military infrastructure. So that's, the Navy, but also the military, the army, the ability for Iran to launch its drones and its ballistic missiles. The idea is decapitation, shock and awe, to use an old term that the Americans used to use, and to showcase also the US's superiority. To show that this is a war that will end soon, there'll be a mission accomplished soon, and that the US and Israel will win this war, to cast any doubt that Iran has a chance and that this war could drag on and on. So the White House has spoken about many different objectives, sometimes contradicting itself. Is this about regime change? Is this about just removing the Ayatollah who was killed a few days ago? But very clearly, this is to showcase U.S. superiority in sort of conventional military terms.
That's what the Americans want. Is this likely to happen at the timescale, or indeed at all, that Washington desires?
So I think clearly, there's a clear mismatch in terms of conventional military terms. I mean, what the U.S. and Israel, two of the most powerful militaries, will certainly be able to decapitate Iran's military. However, what we know from previous sort of campaigns, including the 2003 Iraq War, which again the slogan was shock and awe, is you can declare a military accomplishment. Militaries can destroy, but that doesn't necessarily lead to what will be built afterwards. Militaries don't build. And I think that's where many people who are looking at this have deep concerns, is there is significant civilian casualties. There is certainly a system that's attempted to be destroyed, but it's very hard to see what comes next. whether that is genuine regime change or whether segments of the Iranian system, which is still quite durable, and it's in survival mode and it's built to survive, will just be able to pick up and survive after this. So certainly it'll be a matter of weeks, as the U.S. is saying, for the military side to show its victory. But this war and this conflict will take many, many, many more months, if not years, to reach whatever the other end state is, which is still unclear, which is part of the problem.
Indeed, and messages that are coming out, warnings that are coming out from Tehran themselves are those of defiance and those of powerful resistance, because we have the Revolutionary Guard in the last couple of hours saying that it still has complete control of the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's oil passes down the Strait of Hormuz. It says it is declaring this patch of water closed. It could cause huge amounts of disruption globally. Donald Trump has come back and said, actually, no, we will provide insurance. The US Navy will escort those vessels and those tankers wishing to go on their way. But the fact remains is, regardless of what is happening internationally, Iran is still able to cause an enormous amount of chaos.
That's correct. And this is a system was not built around one man. This is a system of institutions that is still able to endure and to function, and a system that was anticipating this scenario. This scenario, perhaps several years ago, would have been unthinkable for the Iranians, but in the last, since October 7th, but certainly since last year's June war, the 12-day war, there have been preparations for this scenario. And so part of that is how to develop a system, a state of institutions that is able to endure and withstand decapitation attempts and decapitation campaigns. So the IRGC is very much there. The military is very much there. The state is very much there, and it will take a lot more than what the U.S. is planning in terms of military terms to really dismantle. Which is why the question of regime change and uprising becomes important. The U.S. really to pursue its campaign needs something from the society to come up and to from the bottom up go against these systems, and that I think is where it would be more tricky. If that doesn't happen, then the IRGC is built to endure.
Let's have a move now to the more international picture, as this conflict seems to touch absolutely every single country that is not just next to Iran, but is just simply nearby. Renad, stay with us, and I would like you to sort of listen in to hearing what we're going to say from Emily Wither. She's a journalist based in the city of Van in Turkey. A very good morning to you, Emily.
Hello, good morning.
And Van is what, on the border? It's very, very close between the Turkish-Iranian border.
Yeah, that's right. So Turkey's got 3 border crossings with Iran. One of them is in the city of Van, a few hours from the city of Van. And the border crossings have remained open. They were closed, it seemed, for a couple of days, but we're not exactly sure why. But now Iranians are, as they always are, able to come into the country on a 90-day tourist visa, and some are taking advantage of that.
And tell me, you've been to the border crossing over the last few days. What's it been like?
So we're not seeing huge numbers of people at the moment, but we are seeing a slight increase in people coming. And the people I've been speaking to, they've been describing hearing bomb blasts, seeing explosions and fires, and feeling terrified. What's interesting is so many people don't seem to have a plan. Their only plan was to get out and to get to safety. I spoke to one woman who said she got in her car in Tehran. There was really bad traffic, and she just wanted to get her 3-year-old daughter out of the country. I spoke to another man who was just dropping his family off and then planning to go back. And talking to people, feelings are very mixed. I spoke to a number of people who thanked Trump for what he'd done, but then, there were others who were anti-regime and they wanted to see change, but said that this was not the way to go about it. Some people are also crossing for practical reasons. We can't say that all these people coming across are necessarily anti-regime. People are coming because they have a family here. There's a huge Iranian diaspora in Turkey, and there's not really a good internet in Turkey. So some people I spoke to just wanted to get an internet connection so they could carry on with their jobs. And I thought what was most striking was that how people had no idea what the future held. Some people were hopeful. One woman said, no one can predict what is going to happen, but everyone has hope. But when you ask people, what does the future look like? They just can't tell you. They can't make a prediction. So it's a real reflection of just how many unknowns there are right now. And I think we can listen to some of the people that I spoke to now.
This is a kind of a mixed bag, of course. Celebration is there. There are some supporters as well. They're mourning the death of the leader and other generals or other, officials. It's hard to predict, but maybe they're on their last legs.
He was quiet, but there was a fire that was near our home, and our home just shaking like earthquake, and that was terrible. Yeah, actually, it's not good. It's not good for him, but the result is important now. The bombing our country is not good.
How would you feel if they were bombing your whole country? Nothing. They can't do a thing to Iran.
You obviously feel very passionately about it. What's the mood among your neighbours, your friends on the streets?
Everybody feels the same way. It doesn't mean that something is bad has to be replaced with worse. You think Israel or the US care the least bit about 1 inch of Turkey or Iran or anywhere else?
Emily, those are some of the people that you've been talking to on the Turkish-Iranian border. But let's examine what role Turkey is playing in this conflict. We often have the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who positions himself as a broker and a mediator and host of talks. We've seen this happen with the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. But what role does Turkey either wish or not wish to play in this?
Yeah, exactly as you say there, Turkey is very much performing its 360 foreign policy role in this conflict as well. Turkey is a NATO country, and no other NATO country has the same depth of contact with what remains inside Iran. Turkey has very close relations with the Iranian government, the regime. They have a very pragmatic relationship. It's based on trade. There's strong economic ties between the two countries. But at the same time, Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan also has close ties with the US President Donald Trump. And we've heard that reflected in Turkey's statements that it very much wants to stay out of this. It's called the attacks a clear violation of international law, adding that Turkey shares the pain of the Iranian people. So Turkey has a real tricky balancing act here right now. And I think one of the big concerns at the moment for the Turks is another refugee crisis. Right now, the Iranians coming to Turkey, they're not refugees. They're arriving on these tourist visas, as I said, but they're able to come and go freely. But the concern is this is a country of over 90 million people, and there is concerns in Turkey of a mass refugee exodus if this conflict starts to widen inside Iran, if it starts to hit more civilian targets. And Turkey already dealt with that with the Syrian conflict. They played host to over 4 million Syrians over the course of that war and saw the war spill over into their country. And they will not want to see this happening with Iran as well.
Emily Wither at the Turkish-Iranian border, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio. Still with us and listening to that was Renad Mansour. Welcome back, Renad. The unwillingness of Turkey to get involved in all this is almost reflecting of the wider issue that countries that are being directly affected by this are feeling. We've got this morning the US raising travel warnings for Saudi Arabia, for Oman. We have the Israelis telling people in Lebanon to evacuate certain parts because they are carrying out missile attacks. The countries that Iran has wished to draw into the conflict to act almost as a warning system to America, to try to use them to dissuade Washington, to make Washington stop this campaign. How effective is this policy?
I think there's been almost a shock. For a very long time, you can say there was this understanding of violence and almost an equilibrium of violence in which the Gulf states would understand, like we saw in the last year's June war, perhaps symbolic strikes on U.S. bases in the Gulf that are easily repelled as a way for Iran to say we have retaliated, but not to stoke any type of regional uncertainty or regional conflict. This has changed. Iran's is no longer playing by the old books, which, obviously Israel and other countries have also not been playing by, but Iran has decided, no, this is new war. This is a new day, and this is the war. And so Iran has, decided not just to use violence symbolically, but really to use violence as punishment, to attack not just U.S. bases, but where it thinks there are U.S. Targets, including hotels in the Gulf, but also on the energy supply, gas fields, oil fields across the region, really to say that the Gulf, you were trying to stop this war, but you couldn't, and nothing can stop this war. This is real war, and this needs to, the repercussions of this need to be felt in the region and also in around the world.
Ranad Mansour from Chatham House, thank you for joining us on Monocle Radio. We turn to some other news now because the authorities in China hold the two most important gatherings in the calendar this week. The so-called two sessions stand for the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference and the National People's Congress as well. While they are both important events, what purpose do they serve this year? To tell us all, I'm joined by Isabel Hilton, China expert and visiting professor at King's College London. Welcome back, Isabel. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Emma.
Explain to us what the focus is this year, because we'll come to whether Iran has, and the events in Iran will affect the way that China deals with its next year. But the significance, the purpose of these double meetings held very close together.
The meetings are always important because they're for people who watch China, they're one kind of window into the political process. Of the two, the National People's Congress actually has constitutional power. So the National People's Congress, if you want to change the constitution, as Xi Jinping did a few years back to allow him to stay in office, you have to get NPC approval, which I have to say hasn't been a problem. Almost nobody votes against something that the party wants. And the whole kind of political side of the Chinese state has been losing power to the party over Xi Jinping's time in office. This year, however, the significance is largely that the 15th five-year plan will be approved by the National People's Congress, so we'll get a pretty close look at China's intentions for the next 5 years. It's already been fairly visible, but this is the final unveiling of the plan.
And do we know what's in this plan?
Well, yes, we have a pretty good idea what's in the plan. I mean, it's partly continuing as before, but it's continuing as before in the sense that China has, since 2015, been trying to make itself proof against adverse currents coming from outside, in other words, from the United States. So it has been, as we know, securing its supply chains. It's been focusing on exports, on industrial autonomy, and on innovation. And those trends will definitely continue. We also, it would appear, that the Chinese are trying to address a long-running problems that this model has created, which are that the economy is slowing down. They have been trying for 10 years to create a robust internal market, but people still are not spending money because households have too little a share of the national wealth. So people are reluctant to spend. That means China remains dependent on exporting, and that is creating tensions around the world as the flood of cheap and increasingly high quality and high value Chinese goods is posing serious challenge to other industrial economies. So the failure to correct the internal market is creating international tensions, and we will see more efforts to try to correct that in the upcoming 5-year plan.
In that context, Isabel, what role does the conflict in Iran play, given the fact that China's dependence on Iranian oil is significant, isn't it? And also, if you have import-export issues and you have the sheer logistics of the world's shipping lanes being, having to move quickly to try and accommodate things that are happening in the Strait of Hormuz, what does China need to do?
Well, the sheer logistics are probably the most immediate concern for China. It's true that China, almost all of Iran's oil was going to China, as was Venezuela's actually, and collectively they made up about 20% of China's oil imports. China, however, has been stockpiling oil. It's got about 100 days of oil stock, which doesn't mean that It doesn't have an effect on the economy, but it's not an immediate crisis. It was also supplies of things like fertilizer were also very important. And shipping is absolutely vital to China as a major export economy. Again, we see over the past few years China's diversification of shipping routes. So its interest in the Arctic, for example, is one way of avoiding the potential choke points like the Straits of Hormuz. It's secured ports around the world. It has, in terms of energy, been building pipelines so that it's not entirely dependent on seaborne imports. So there's a certain amount of built-in resilience. But as we see from Chinese commentary on this, it thoroughly disapproves of this way of conducting affairs. Wang Yi, the Politburo member and acting foreign minister, has been making a lot of phone calls. And in a long statement, he said that the point of military strength is to prevent war, not launch assaults on other countries and grave violations of sovereignty. So that's a fairly predictable position from China, but one I think that will get some echoes around the world.
Isabel Hilton, China expert and visiting professor at King's College London. Thank you as ever for joining us on The Globalist. Still to come on today's programme.
It's not often that I'm blown away by hearing experience, but this has left me with my jaw on the floor. The culture is so respectful, it's so unique, but the landscapes take your breath away.
We hear about trends for the luxury travel market in 2026. Stay tuned.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, an obsessive attention to detail. With UBS's Chief Investment Office House View, we're focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals. So you get the big picture broken down into thought-provoking insights. Delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts. UBS. Banking is our craft.
Let's have a look at today's newspapers. It's 7:21 here in London. Zoe Grunewald is Westminster editor at The Lead and is doing what we're all trying to do, which is to keep up with the headlines.
Yes.
It's absolutely astonishing the scale at which the things are changing. Yeah. Absolutely. So what we will do is we will take a step back, we will pause, and we'll talk about the things that we can talk about, which aren't likely to change in the next 10 minutes. One of which, Zoe, is Donald Trump giving Keir Starmer a massive thump in the stomach yesterday.
Absolutely. So we know that Donald Trump is partial to expressing exactly how he feels about someone in the moment. But thus far, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has been able to avoid the wrath of Donald Trump. But things have changed quite quickly. The special relationship seems to have deteriorated quite rapidly since Starmer refused to join the US's initial strikes on Iran. Donald Trump has been ringing around various newspapers in the US as well as the UK. He told The Sun on Monday that the relationship is obviously not what it was. He said that Keir Starmer is not Winston Churchill, which, is quite obvious. But as we know, Winston Churchill is kind of a bit of a hero here in the UK, so it definitely feels like a personal attack. He's just been very, very critical of Keir Starmer quite publicly in a press conference and to the various newspapers, and has basically said that he's not happy with the UK. He's spoken about the UK's refusal to let the US use the Chagos Islands base. And has just been talking about how the relationship is deteriorating. This is going to be a massive blow to Keir Starmer, who has thus far done his best to try and keep Donald Trump on side.
Indeed, and people have expressed surprise. There's an article in the Times today which explicitly asks the question. It's Katie Ball saying, is there a special relationship dead? Why Trump turned on Britain? But the context of this is very, very significant, isn't it? Firstly, Keir Starmer recognises the damage done to both the Labour Party and to the British international reputation in 2003 with Tony Blair and going in with George Bush into Iraq. And he has explicitly said we're not doing this again. But when we've seen what the other countries are doing as well, Emmanuel Macron has said we're not diving in on this one. Spain has just come in and said we're not diving in on this one. Other countries are now saying this is a violation of international law. And one wonders whether a shouting match between Donald Trump and Keir Starmer is actually something which is permanent and threatening, or whether it is just something that can and we have seen has been recovered from.
I think that's absolutely right. And there's also a question of, actually, is it beneficial to Keir Starmer right now, domestically, politically, to have this kind of conflict with Donald Trump? Trump is not popular here. The papers might be lapping up his comments, but actually voters don't really like Donald Trump. And the majority shows that they don't want the UK to join the US on striking Iran. So, and Starmer has been struggling, and we saw this in the by-election last week, with hemorrhaging support to the left. Obviously, the Greens won this Gorton and Denton constituency from Labour. I think Keir Starmer might be making a calculation now that actually, if he's got the bolstering of support from European allies and voters, then he may as well have it out with Donald Trump.
Let's focus on an article about Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, and probably being pushed to the sidelines at the moment. But he has come out speaking very clearly, saying what is happening in Iran could actually hurt Ukraine. I mean, first and foremost, Russia. OK, there is this fear about the amount of drones and the supply of armaments that the Russians could have as Iran is using its own drones to defend itself. But Russia is really, really good when it comes to making money when there is no oil anywhere else.
Absolutely. So Volodymyr Zelensky has told an Italian newspaper that he worries that Ukraine could find themselves having difficulty obtaining missiles and weapons to defend our skies, and because the Americans and the allies in the Middle East might need them to defend themselves. He also worries about focus being turned to the Iranian crisis if this becomes a long war. Will the appetite to continue defending Kiev and Ukraine, will that diminish if the focus from Western nations is elsewhere? And I think this is a really real fear from Zelensky, as you said, not just because Russia can also make some hay out of the disruption to the oil supply, but also because when focus is put elsewhere, that is a perfect time for other strongman leaders with expansionist agendas to try and make some gains. So you can see why Zelensky would be very concerned.
OK, let's move on to an article in The Guardian asking the question, with 3 months in now since Australia decided to ban the use of social media to teenagers under 16. No one's quite worked out whether it works yet.
Yeah, the title is has it been a success? And as you just suggested, the answer is we don't know because it hasn't been long enough. So the initial figures show that 4.7 million accounts were removed under the ban, and this includes things like TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitch. But there is going to be an evaluation of the ban. It's going to last 2 years, run by the e-safety commissioner. It's going to look at schools. It's going to look at kids, families. It's going to do some surveying. What they've seen at the moment is that there has been some evidence, obviously, that young people have come off social media. The President Albanese said that the Prime Minister, Albanese said he saw more children outside over Christmas, which was quite interesting. But when you talk to kids, I mean, they're finding ways around it, which was always what people were worried
children
about. Yes, precisely. And they're tech savvy, more importantly, because they've grown up on it.
Indeed. Excellent article in The Guardian where there's some sort of exquisitely elegant young people all saying circumventing the social media ban was so much easier than we thought we would be. They're all hooking up on LinkedIn. Brilliant idea. OK, finally, The Times. If you're a devil worshipper, for all of the devil worshippers out there listening to Monocle Radio, obviously thank you for your time and your devotion. But by all accounts, there are images and AI is something that are some things that the devil worshippers are really going to town with.
Yes. So if you are a devil worshipper listening to Monocle Radio and you're using artificial intelligence, the exorcists are onto you. They know what you're doing. So there is an exorcism conference with many speakers, and apparently they're going to put AI sort of at front of centre of their concern. They say that AI is already being used to generate images of children involved in satanic rituals. They're worried about these groups using AI to communicate with each other online and bypass usual forms of surveillance. But I think more broadly, this is an article about how the church is regarding AI, and it talks about Pope Leo has been quite vocal in warning that AI is a risk. It's robbing people of their privacy, their jobs, and of course he wanted to be named after Pope Leo, who fought for workers' rights because he believes that AI could strip workers of their dignity, and worries that extremely rich people who are investing in artificial intelligence are totally ignoring the value of human beings and of humanity. So there is a slightly silly element to this, but actually more broadly, clearly the church are becoming more and more concerned about AI too.
Well, yes. I mean, let's let's explore both elements. First and foremost, you said there's going to be a thing in Rome. There's going to be an exorcism course in May. Speakers who are booked to address the audience at the May event. Don't say we're not helpful to you, Monocle Radio listeners. Father Fortunato Di Nota, a Sicilian priest who fights Satanists. We also have another speaker, Beatrice Orgolini, who's an academic. We'll talk about how occult groups in Italy are using AI to generate the symbols they use in their rites. It is believed that there are 263 occult groups in Italy. I wonder who's keeping sort of a tally of this.
Yeah.
But also it had the Vatican had a conference on AI last week. I'm absolutely fascinated by the agenda being set by the Vatican when they sit down at, 1st of January going, right, what do we want to talk about this year? What's getting what's getting your interest up?
Yeah, and I do want to make a pitch, I'm a freelance journalist. If anyone wants to commission me to go to the AI exorcism conference to do a big write-up, hey, that sounds amazing, right?
Absolutely.
Who knows what they'll say.
But it is an important thing about that, and the Pope has raised a really, really good point here. In the middle of all this silliness, because the pictures in the Times are very fun, the Pope has said that he now wants to renew the battle as AI threatens to strip workers of their dignity. And this idea of the creation of a sort of a new society when the ultra-rich are able to invest in AI and ignore the value of human beings and of humanity. There's a really gentle beauty to that, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is a Pope that has been particularly progressive and has been trying to kind of anchor the conversations that often get taken away by the rich Silicon Valley billionaires or, the questions about how much responsibility we have for each other. He's trying to ground it in those kind of progressive values again. And obviously workers' rights has been a big part of that throughout history. So it's nice that the Pope's on the side of the people who don't want AI to run riot.
Zoe Grunewald, Westminster editor at The Lead. And if you are wanting to hire Zoe to do the AI Satanism conference, she's available for bookings.
I'll do it for free.
She'll do it for free, everybody. Never say that. You're listening to The Globalist. Thank you, Zoe. A quick look now at some of the other stories we're following today. The international price of oil and of gas have risen again as concerns grow that supplies could be affected by the conflict in Iran. Yesterday, Brent crude briefly surpassed $85 a barrel for the first time since July 2024. Myanmar's junta says it's to ration the use of private cars as part of fears over the supply of fuel. Under a new even-odd licensing scheme, even-numbered plates will only be allowed to drive on even dates and odd licensed plates on odd-numbered days. And prosecutors in Cuba have charged 6 people with terrorism in connection with an incident last week aboard a speedboat. 4 Cuban nationals were killed, 6 others were wounded as they entered Cuban waters and opened fire on a border guard vessel. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Six months after a youth-led uprising led to the fall of its government, Nepal holds its first major elections. Nearly 19 million voters in the landlocked Himalayan nation have registered to cast their ballots. So what kind of test of democracy are we just about to see? Well, Dinesh Kafla is an academic and journalist in Nepal. He writes a regular column on politics and culture for the Kathmandu Post. And he joins me now from Pokhara, which is about 200 kilometres west of Kathmandu, where he's travelling to cover the election. A very good afternoon to you, Dinesh. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Emma.
Just explain to us what is happening in Pokhara now. Why have you been taken there?
I have come for 2 reasons. First is to cover elections, but also to cast my vote because I belong here. And this is interesting this time. Earlier, I used to be in Kathmandu during the elections to cover the elections. But this time I came to Pokhara because it is a high-stake election. And it's a shame not to go and cast vote at home, even if you're doing your job. There is this euphoria about the elections where everyone is going home. Kathmandu is emptied right now because it's a city of migrants. So everyone seems to have gone home. The government has recorded that almost 1 million people have gone home to cast their votes. So everyone is back in their hometowns to cast their votes, and that's why I'm here, apart from doing my job here.
And describe you mentioned there's a feeling of euphoria. What is bringing this about?
This is basically a euphoria of change. Almost 1 million new voters are there, especially the Gen Z who have registered the first time. So everyone is excited about bringing change. So the entire narrative about the election is a narrative of change this time, and that's why the euphoria.
So just explain to us this huge change that came about. It started off 6 months ago where young people took to the streets furious at what they believed to be a government that was corrupt, was not on their side. Right. And they managed to enact very profound change in Nepal, didn't they?
Right, they did.
Explain to us a little bit about what happened next.
After that, we had a new government headed by a former Chief Justice, and the government has done a pretty good job of organizing the elections, although it has not worked very well in terms of punishing the culprits of the September 8 and 9 events. So there is also some kind of a disappointment that one of the commissions that was supposed to bring out basically the names of the culprits, it didn't do its job properly. But then the government has also played safe because obviously some of the major political parties leaders will be implicated in the commission's report. So it seems that the government does not want to disturb the elections. So the fear of the elections not happening has been dispelled. Now that we're in the election mood, it's a bittersweet experience. But then the entire country is now ready to go into elections and elect a new government, and that's why it's kind of positive, although there have been some negative sides.
Indeed. I mean, Nepal is a country where obviously the voice of young people can enact profound change. So when we look into the elections, are there young names on the ballot paper?
There are so many young people who are contesting the elections this time. Almost 30% of the candidates are new and young, under the age of 40. And so the entire election is about bringing in changes. And also one of the interesting things that's happening here is that the young people who were never understood to be interested in elections or politics, they are now very much interested in politics and participating in politics, and they're also trying to convince the older generation that they should vote for the new. And so I was talking to my dad this morning. He's 87 years old. He has voted for just a single party his entire life, and this time he's planning to change his vote. And that's the new change, that's the euphoria of change that I was talking about. My mother is also, she has also decided the same. So everybody seems to be talking about bringing in new people, whether it's from the established political parties themselves or the new ones, especially the new ones seem to have a better advantage here because the entire idea of change is bringing in new people.
Dinesh Kafla, thank you so much for joining us on the line from your hometown of Pokhara. That was Dinesh Kafla, academic and journalist based in Nepal. You're listening to The Globalist live on Monocle Radio. Now, recent US and Israeli strikes on Iran have triggered debate far beyond the Middle East. In Taiwan, the killing of Iran's supreme leader has sparked discussion about security risks. Let's hear the reaction from Taiwan to the conflict. I'm joined now by Brian Heyer, the founding editor of New Bloom magazine. Good afternoon.
Thanks for having me.
The issue of what is happening in the Middle East can sometimes feel like a very, very long way away from various parts of the world where you are included. How much is what's happening in Iran touching life in Taiwan?
Yeah, I think it's perceived as the latest blow up in the Middle East, but it has wide-ranging impacts, particularly regarding perception of U.S. power, whether with this or the seizure of the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, in January. Shows the U.S. is in fact able to kill or kidnap world leaders. That's how far military projection goes. So fears are that China could do that to Taiwan, but questions are if this show of military might by the U.S. would deter China.
And does what is happening in Iran and what has happened in Venezuela, as you mentioned, actually make the Taiwanese feel safer?
That's a paradox. I think that from some particularly more pro-independence leaning parts of the political spectrum, that is the case. And so this is depicted actually in a rather positive light, showing again how powerful the US is. It's framed as a reciprocal action, in fact, that, for example, Iran had hostilities for the US, hence eventually the US was finally pushed to do this. And then talk is that this is a slap in the face to China because Iran is perceived as closer to China.
And what questions does this now ask about what the United States would do were China to actually mount any sort of large-scale military operation against Taiwan? Is there a sense that actually the United States would ride to the rescue? Because taking on Venezuela is one thing. Taking on Iran, we have seen, has caused widespread complications right across the Middle East. But to try to take on China, that is something completely different.
Absolutely, as you say. And so actually, I am slightly worried because I think that may be the wrong takeaway that people have from this. So I think there are those that takes us as reassuring, but the U.S. would not able to engage in such actions regarding China. It's a very different economy of scale between, again, Venezuela, Iran, and the U.S. and China. And so I think there is that concern, but this is often what the general public will read international relations as through this very narrow lens of the tension with China, or how does this impact Taiwan-China relations, or the U.S. when it goes into another situation geopolitically. I think people don't always perceive how this is not always seen as reassuring by the rest of the world.
And indeed, when Taiwan is actually assessing its own military capability and its own approach to defence, and it has, and indeed military cooperation with countries like Israel, how have the events in Iran actually made Taiwan reassess what it does itself?
So it is very interesting because Taiwan was very quick to align itself with the US and Israel regarding this, saying that Iran's actions against other countries are a form of aggression, donating 100,000 USD, for example, to Israel for medical aid. And so Taiwan has been very quick to insert itself. That's an ally of the US and Israel here. And I think this is, again, continuing the pattern of banking on US power. Historically, the US has always been Taiwan's security guarantor from the threat of Chinese invasion.
Brian Heyer, the founding editor of New Bloom magazine, thank you so much for joining us on the line from Taiwan.
IQ, EQ, and AI. 3 components key to the craft of innovation at UBS. Because to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving age, you need a partner with decades of experience, endless passion for the work, and a finger on the pulse of leading technologies. Bridging human expertise with artificial intelligence, all to elevate you. UBS, banking is our craft.
Now let's have a look at the latest news from the world of television. To tell us more, I'm joined now by Scott Bryan, TV critic and broadcaster. A very good morning to you, Scott. Welcome back.
Morning.
Very good morning to you. Let's talk about the Paramount Warner Brothers deal. Last week, Netflix decided that it no longer wanted to play. It said that it couldn't make any money out of the deal. Now Netflix has actually decided to issue a bit of a warning, saying that the Paramount Warner Brothers deal will lead to job losses. Talk us through it.
Yeah, so Netflix co-chief executive Greg Peters says that he is nervous about potential job losses following the Skydance deal. Of course, Warner Brothers Discovery has been very much in the air in terms of its future over the course of the last few months. And now Paramount Skydance, who also own CBS, have now sort of taken in, after having a really quite eye-watering offer of more than 111 billion. So I think Netflix are now doing essentially a PR tour, essentially just saying that the reasons why they didn't go ahead with the deal, they just didn't think it was financially sustainable, but also highlighting the implications that it will mean for Hollywood, and stating that there will be possible job losses, potentially, at least initially 6 billion in cuts. I mean, I guess the cynic around might say, well, if Netflix were going to swoop in and purchase Warner's, then what difference would there have been? There would have been cuts anyway. I think it also adds to the fact that regardless of who was going to be the owner. I think there has been a lot of concern within Hollywood about whoever was going to own the company, how that would have implications in terms of the future of the Hollywood film industry. Of course, if Netflix were going to purchase it, I think people were concerned about the longevity and future of cinemas. So I guess there's a lot of question marks about this generally. I guess also question marks in regards to what that will mean for consumers. I mean, will they end up having to pay more? Because the significance of this deal, the amount of debt the company has had to take on purely just to make it through the door in terms of the financial deal, it is nothing like it has been in recent years. It's a considerable amount of money.
Indeed. I mean, there are always questions during mergers and acquisitions, M&A, whether actually any money is made out of this, that stock prices do go up. But is Netflix the right organisation to ask these questions right now?
Well, I mean, I think that's the big question. I think people would say, well, what difference would it be under Netflix potentially? I think Netflix, it's interesting in terms of how they were going to be purchasing, potentially a rival, HBO, in terms of where that would be heading. I think what is interesting is what we've heard is that Paramount and HBO in the US are essentially going to be merged onto one app, as in the HBO Max app. However, HBO is going to be treated independently of that. I mean, it was going to be the case that if Netflix had purchased Warner's, then of course, HBO Max will be launching in the UK relatively soon. And I think there are a lot of questions about the future of that if Netflix is essentially going to be its owner. Of course, that's not the case anymore. But I think we are, as we have been in recent years, because of the threat of AI, in terms of there have been already a lot of existential concerns about job security, job futures. And I think this consolidation within the market, regardless of who the owner is going to be, is only going to exacerbate those concerns.
It's that big balance, though, isn't it? Consolidation, yet allowing organisations to operate with independence. And we're seeing already the announcement that Paramount Skydance wants to combine Paramount Plus and HBO Max into one streaming service. Arguably simpler for people with remote controls trying to navigate their way through their television. But actually, what does this do for what actually we're going to be watching?
Well, I think for HBO Max, I mean, it will have quite a lot of content on there. It will get boosted. I mean, content on HBO Max will include a lot of the back catalogue of Warner's. It will also include upcoming series such as Harry Potter. They've also got the deals, not in the US, but in Europe with the Olympics as well. So the access to sports rights is absolutely huge. And linked with Paramount, you've got all of the Tom Cruise movies. You've also got links to a lot of sort of upcoming programs tied to CBS as well. But I think a concern is we are way past the period of kind of streaming apps able to provide choice. I mean, they all hooked us in on a very small amount of money, very affordable. And I think there's now been quite a consolidation that to have access to the shows you like, you are going to have to pay for it. And I found it rather surprising that just in the last month, the UK sort of subscription service, satellite service Sky, are now offering a deal to have access to all of these streaming apps, Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu and more, under one fee, essentially a cable package, which is back where we started 10 years ago.
Finally, let's touch on the struggles that the BBC has, an organisation beset with its own problems perpetually, but it can't find a successor to the Director General.
Well, that's what's been reported fairly recently. I mean, it has been, of course, months now since we've had the announcement that Tim Davie, the current Director General, is standing down. And it's a crucial time for the BBC's future, of course, with the licence fee negotiation coming up. That essentially is the deal about how much the consumers or viewing public will be having to pay for their licence. So it's a critical time. Of course, the BBC's been going through a whole lot of scandals in relation to the BAFTA Film Awards fairly recently. And it seems to be, according to some reporting, that they are finding it hard to find a new person to take over the role, just because I guess the challenges, the headwinds, the fact that you could end up dominating the front pages of newspapers can actually maybe create a career liability. So some names such as Alex Mahon, who recently ran Channel 4, along with Charlotte Moore, who used to be the head of TV at the BBC. They're not included in the overall shortlist they were tipped to be. There is some hype around Matt Britton, who is a former Google exec. But so far, there doesn't really seem to be. You need to have somebody, I find, with British broadcasting experience, and of course he has a tech background, so there's some scepticism there. So it's a real wait and see. It's well paid, but is it long lasting for them?
Scott Bryan, thank you as ever for joining us on Monocle Radio to give us all the updates from the world of television. We touch upon the world of luxury travel now because Black Tomato, based between London and New York, truly goes the extra mile, from chartering yachts through Antarctic water, booking helicopters and to secluded islands and much more. Their co-founder is Tom Marchant, and he's spoken to Fernanda Augusta Pacheco about the travel trends in 2026 and what destinations are on the rise.
The world is in a state of flux. Places, for multitudes of reasons, become popular then fade away. Some are like big external factors. It might be geopolitical. I mean, if we're looking at this year, places that are, I'm always loath to say emerging because I'm sure lots of your listeners will know these places, but I think places that we have a keen eye on. We do a lot into Central America, Panama particularly, just has the most incredible properties and experiences there, that combination of kind of both the Latin and Caribbean coasts in one place. We've been working in that area for a long time, but the quality of experience has really, really increased and improved, and it's been fantastic. Last year, and I still hope this year will continue to be a growing popular place, is Greenland, which I know is very topical given what's being discussed out there. But Iceland, its near neighbour, has been a cornerstone of our company since we started. I must have been there myself 20, 25 times. I almost feel Icelandic. And Greenland, is this incredibly wild, raw and elemental place, but it almost has like this sort of final frontier feel to it. And we've been working over there, developing experience with our partners for a long time. And last year for a number of years, we've been taking people, but we've really seen that growing interest. Now, people are still keen to go. I'm not sure whether people are putting plans on hold. I very much hope they're not. I can't recommend that highly enough. Another area that I'm a huge fan of is the southern end of Chile. I say Chile because that's Chile for the Brits, Chile for the American audience. I'm a huge fan of South America. Growing up, I always wanted to explore Chile. I was just fascinated by the contrast between the Atacama in the north and then the wine regions in the centre, and then getting down into southern Patagonia. And down in the south, in the southern Patagonia National Park, there is the most incredible area, which has an Explorer Hotel. It just opened a couple of years ago. It was Doug Tompkins, the founder of North Face and Esprit. It was his lodge where he had been building out a conservation area to protect the indigenous flora and fauna and environment. And I've been down there, and it's like no other place in the world. And slowly people are beginning to visit it, but it's like being dropped onto another planet. And Patagonia itself is great, but if you go up into Argentina, it might be, there's a few more people around. This place in the middle of nowhere. And if you seek isolation or freedom or just a proper sense of disconnection around a landscape that will blow your mind daily, that's a great place to look at.
You mentioned isolation. I was looking at your website. Of course, it's divided if you want something for family, honeymoon, but there's the solo holidays as well. I'm fascinated by it because I think sometimes that's what people need in their lives as well, right? I prefer to travel either in smaller groups or with a partner, not with a big group of friends, to be honest. But solo, I've never actually done it.
It's interesting. I like both. Quite often I think travel is not all the time, but sometimes travel is the antidote to your day-to-day. Right? And you're looking, if you travel, like maybe you want to do something different. And what we see quite often with solo travelers is you might be living an incredibly hectic work, social life at home. And what that means is you rarely get time with your own thoughts. Now, that might scare some people, but I just think time alone to think, to not be distracted, both by connecting with other people. As much as I like the culture in places, I think you need to, like I said, culture is non-negotiable, but you can still have that hit in isolation. And I think we see the solo traveller as people who want to take themselves away, be with their own thoughts, but also to then sometimes push themselves. So you might be travelling solo, not in a wilderness, but in a new destination, and the sort of anticipation and the slight, at times anxiety of what I'm going to have to push myself to do something. It brings parts of you out that perhaps you're not doing at home because you're very comfortable. So there's a lot of reasons to be said for it, and I always try and fit in a couple of trips a year where I just go on my own somewhere, because it makes you a bit braver if you're in a bustling place to go out and connect with people, but also to go to wildernesses like Iceland particularly, where I'll go and might go hiking on my own, and just 48 hours of relative silence and your own thoughts, I think is a pretty good tonic for the soul.
What about your personal travel plan for the year? I mean, is there any place that you haven't visited that perhaps you would like to go this year?
Yeah.
I'm sure you visited many places.
It's always a tough one, because I'm very fortunate in the position I'm in that part of what we do is to explore the world so we can introduce it to our clients. I think you probably sense, from when I talk about Chile, like one type of travel I love is the great expanses.
You like a winter holiday.
Yeah, I did. Well, my mother's from Finland, so everyone thinks it's sort of in the roots. But we take a lot of people to Mongolia, but I've never been. And I met someone recently whose family are from a particular very, very remote part of Mongolia, deep in the steppe, and where there's a sacred valley that they only have access to. And you go up there and you spend days riding on horseback, setting up camps. And it's not often that I'm almost like blown away by hearing experience, because I'm around this the whole time, and it's a great position to be in. But to hear all that, quite often I'm like, okay, it sounds good, maybe. But this just left me with my jaw on the floor. And every client we ever take out to Mongolia, whatever they're doing there, comes back with that, wow, I didn't think I'd be moved as much as I was. The culture is so respectful, it's so unique, but the landscapes take your breath away. So I'm trying at the moment, negotiating with business and family plans to see if I can get out into the Mongolian steppe.
Tom Marchant there from Black Tomato. He was talking to Monocle's Fernanda Augusta Pacheco. And you can also read our interview with Tom on Monocle's travel annual, The Escapist, which is out now. And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producers Carlotta Ribello, Angelica Jobson and Rima Takahashi. Our researcher was Annalise Maynard and our studio manager is Christy O'Grady, with editing assistance by Lily Austin. After the headlines, there's more music on the way. The briefing's live at midday here in London. I'll be back with The Globalist at the same time tomorrow. Join me for that if you can. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you very much for listening.